We're going to start off today with if there's any introduction bill requests. Any? Not seeing any. We'll move on. We're going to start today. I do want to kind of preface this just a little bit. These the three bills we're hearing today are the identical three bills that we heard a few weeks ago. Nothing's really changed. This is just kind of the Senate version. So we'll see how everything's kind of going, but I may have to kind of slow down a little bit and kind of limit some time on some of this on the testimonies, but only because we've had this hearing, but I do want people to have the opportunity to testify. So we're going to go back through this process here, and we're going to start with we're going to open up a hearing on SB 356, and Mike will bring us up to speed on that.
Mike Heim with the Reviser of Statutes Office. I'm going to have the House version of this bill passed out here. The Senate Bill 356 deals with firearms and providing immunity for federal firearms licensees for dealing with firearms hold agreements. And the Senate version, which passed 40-0, defines a firearms hold agreement and basically says a federal firearms licensee conducting business in the state that's entered into a firearms hold agreement will be immune from civil liability and so forth. The immunity shall not apply to any action arising from a hold agreement if the action was a result of an otherwise unlawful conduct. So the Senate version is simpler than the House version, which is 2501. And this committee added a fair amount of things that I can go through if you want, but you've got them in front of you so you can compare.
Committee, any questions for Mike? Not seeing any. Thank you, Mike. We're going to open up the oral. We only actually have one oral proponent speaking this morning on this, and it would be Senator Stearns. Senator, welcome to the committee.
There we go. Sorry. Senator Brad Stearns, District 22, which is Riley County, so Manhattan, K-State, and the surrounding areas. And I'm lucky because I got one county. So don't have to go through explaining all those things. I appreciate your time. And it's first time seeing the House committees and the numbers of people that are on your committees. And so appreciate what you can get done with these numbers. So and support of this bill. So I'm here as a proponent of Senate Bill 356. It's been explained by Mike regarding what the bill is itself. But to me, it's a way to prevent suicides. I'm a pro-life legislator and protection of all life at all levels, and I think this continues to do it. It's a gun shop opportunity and pawn shop or others that are federally licensed program on a volunteer basis to store guns on a temporary basis for people who want them to be stored off-site, not in their homes. The gun shops are currently hesitant to do so because of the possibility of being held liable should a person come back to retrieve their guns and then use them to harm themselves or others. This bill would simply resolve the store from liability should that happen. The entire process is completely voluntary and would have no waiting periods or restrictions on the gun owner's ability to get possession of their firearms at any time. On a personal note, 22 years ago, I lost a son to death by firearm suicide, and I pray others would never have to experience that. If this bill helps save one life, it's well worth the passage of this bill. I thank you for your consideration and hope you'll pass it out favorably, and we'll stand for questions.
Committee, any questions for the senator? Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator, for being here today and sharing your testimony. Could you give me, I guess, just kind of how you envision this would, I guess, in practical, in the course of a day, how this may, I don't know, can you paint a picture to me of how this would be implemented, or based on your personal experience, I guess, and how you envision this would play out in the real world? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator, for your question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding the question, how it plays out, I don't know at what point it would ever, quote, stop a person from dying of suicide, but anything we can do to help them at least recognize that there's an issue and there's an opportunity for help. The hope would be that community mental health centers, and I know Johnson County Mental Health has been very active in this, and hopefully the other mental health centers would then be able to put out this information as another opportunity to help people. In my particular district with Fort Riley and the concerns of the soldiers and veterans and all those that are dealing with these suicidal possible ideations, helps them just have some time. And it creates a scenario that, as I said, no freedoms are taken away. It's all voluntary. Someone asks the question, well, how about if the gun owner knows that this person is going to utilize the gun or firearm for harm themselves or others? Well, you can quote, hey, just checking on you, something like that. But beyond that, it's all voluntary. It's all freedoms. They can take the gun at any time. But again, just timing and just allowing some time to hopefully help them think through what they're possibly going to do. And that's the whole purpose. So we can just help provide some time for that. And as I said, the information, getting it out to people, I think, as most things, we deal with lots of scenarios, but people wonder why they don't take advantage. And just getting the education out there as another tool that someone can use with mental health to be able to provide that for people that are concerned.
Representative Corbett.
Chairman, it's a good bill, and would you have any qualms about the House Bill 2501 added a few amendments? Would you have any problem if
Thank you for your question, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I haven't really studied it. I'm sorry. I don't think it's just a more clarification, as far as I understand it, as far as what specific liabilities. And so I would not be opposed and see that as a friendly amendment just to clean up technicalities and those kind of things. But the intent is still there, and so that's the most important thing. So thank you for your question.
Any more questions for the senator? Not seeing any. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
That was the only oral proponent that we have for this. We do have 4 written proponents. I don't have any neutral or opponents to this. Was there anybody else wanting to speak to this bill? Not seeing any. I'm going to close the hearing on SB 356. And we're going to open the hearing on SB 364. And Mike will brief us on that.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Senate Bill 364 is a bill that is comparable to House Bill 2502, which will be passed out to you. It basically provides that it deals with hunting and fishing licenses. First section is a new section. And it provides that on and after the effective date of the act, the Department of Wildlife and Parks shall offer a resident senior combination hunting and fishing license. If you're 65 years of age or older, the fee shall not exceed 1/8 of the fee for the general combination lifetime hunting and fishing license. I think that lifetime hunting and fishing license can be up to $962.50. At least that's what the SUP note says. Anyway, it does provide for some further amendments. If a person is 5 years of age or younger, a license fee shall not exceed, and it's 1/3 of the fee for the general fishing and combination hunting license. Current law is $300. Between 6 and 15, it would be half the fee. That's the Senate version. The House version is a little different, but basically they're pretty close.
Thank you, Mike. Do we have any questions for the Reviser? Not seeing any. Thank you. We're going to open up the oral proponents on this one, and first up, actually I have Senator Shane. I don't see Senator Shane here. We're going to move him to written only. Next up, we have Representative Corbett. Well, welcome to committee.
I'm basically here, the bill we passed out was the same bill that passed both chambers last year. And the thing you got to remember, especially on the youth license, there's a lot of times that parents or relation buy these licenses hoping that their boy or girl will enjoy the outdoors. It's a gamble. So I think also this is kind of like Wildlife and Parks does not much for recruitment. The youth license recruits, the senior license retains, and I'd like to see this House kind of hold hard on the House amendment. And one other suggestion I'd have, if possible, try not to run this with any ducks.
No waterfowl allowed.
Yep.
Committee, any questions for Representative? Representative Smoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, would you please explain the difference, in your opinion, between the Senate version and the pricing and the House version, and why you're wanting us to keep the House version?
The reason I like the language in the House version is it says the license would not exceed the 300, and the same way with the senior license. The way it's kind of worded in the Senate version, it's kind of got the flexibility to continually grow over the years. And the purpose of this bill is to get more people out into the field and to keep as many retirees moving as we can.
Thank you very much.
Committee, any more questions? Not seeing any. Thank you.
Thanks.
Committee, that was actually the only oral proponent we had. Was there anybody else here that came wanting to speak on that? Not seeing any. I do have written neutral, and I do have another written proponent as well. I have no opponents today on this. And with no more questions or comments on this, I'm going to close the hearing on SB 364. Next up, I'm going to open up a hearing on SB 391. And Mike, will you bring us up to speed on that? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Senate Bill 391 is comparable to House Bill 2504, which you'll have a copy of here in a minute. They're not exactly identical, but they're pretty close. The Senate version provides that no city or county shall adopt or enforce an ordinance or resolution that prohibits a landlord from refusing to lease or privately owned single-family or multifamily or commercial property to a person because the person's source of income to pay rent consists of basically either housing vouchers or housing assistance programs. It restricts the landlord's ability to use or consider income qualifying methods, credit scores, credit reports, eviction history, property damage history, criminal history, and so on. Limits the amount of security deposit an ordinance that would limit the amount of security deposit or requires the landlord to give automatic right of first refusal. And it provides that any ordinance or resolution adopted by a city or county prior to July 1 of 2026 would be null and void. The House version has got a longer title, and it's got a provision in it that nothing in this section shall be construed to prevent a city or county from adopting, maintaining, and enforcing an ordinance that prohibits a landlord from discriminating against a tenant or based solely on that the person is a recipient of veterans benefits. Other than that, I think they're almost the same.
Committee, any questions for Mike? Representative Howell.
Thank you, Chair. So does that mean that the Senate version does not have a protection for veterans?
That just means that the Senate version is silent.
Okay, thank you.
Committee, any other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Mike. I'm going to open up the oral proponent side on this, and first up, I have Ed Juskina. I apologize about that. Ed, welcome back to committee.
There we go. Better. My name is Ed Juskinia. I represent the Associated Landlords of Kansas. And rather than waste your time in repeating the same testimony you heard from me on 2504, I'd like to refer you to some written testimony that came to my attention last night, and I think you guys have got a copy of it. It's from Gerber Industries. It's from a Lawrence landlord that explains it better than anything I've heard so far about what this bill tries to do. And I would encourage you to read it. It takes all the emotion out of it. It simply states facts. And with that, I'd stand for questions.
Committee, any questions? Representative Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very sympathetic to the plight of the landlords for all the reasons you're talking about in Lawrence. But explain to me why, being from Garden City, I should try to help Lawrence save itself from itself. If Lawrence wants to be crazy, why shouldn't we let it? And quite frankly, I'd welcome investment by your clients and others in Garden City. We need housing, and we have a much better regulatory environment.
I don't know if I should answer that humorously or talk to your builders and have them build. Affordable housing is what we need more than anything right now. And the fear is that if landlords start leaving Lawrence, they're going to start selling off to corporations, which is your worst nightmare, because corporations don't, well, I'm not going to get into that either. Garden City, I will talk to some builders there and see if we can get some building done.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Representative Mosley.
Thank you. And I'm a proud Lawrence legislator, so that was a little rude. But anyway, source of income, so what the source of income ordinance does in Lawrence is basically it says that the sole reason why you can discriminate against someone is not because they were receiving a voucher. So I'm going to read a list of people that this protects and tell me which one you're offended by. So source of income protects veterans receiving disability benefits, victims of domestic violence receiving rental assistance, seniors on Social Security or disability, students using college stipends, workers on tip wages, which we have a lot of tip wages workers in Lawrence because, or interested in the state in general, but especially in Lawrence because we're a service-based economy outside of our universities, union workers on strike, and then landlords who experience damages to units on increased administrative costs. So which one of these people are you offended by being protected with source of income?
I'm sure glad I had a 2-hour meeting with you after the last meeting.
Yeah, it was a lovely
That
meeting. It was great to see
interesting. We had a
you.
closed-door meeting afterwards.
Yes.
I'm offended by nobody. What I want is to be able to do due diligence.
So who shouldn't be protected by this group? Who should we be protecting in society? Should we not be protecting veterans on disability payments since this bill is also blind to that? Do veterans who get disability and that's their sole source of income, and there's only one, that's the only thing that that's the only thing the ordinance does, it says that you cannot, it doesn't say you can't do background checks. So if someone's a criminal or they've done damages in the past, you can say that that's the reason why I don't want to rent to them, but the sole reason can't be that a veteran's receiving disability benefits and that's the only income that they're receiving. So do they deserve protections at all?
You have to look at the total package on source of income. We discussed this for 2 hours last time.
Yeah, we did. I was late to elections because of it.
I'm not sure we're going to ever come to an agreement on that. The one thing we did agree on, we would disagree. So I'm not sure how to answer your question except for the fact that we have to do due diligence.
Okay, so you're saying that veterans don't deserve protections, victims of domestic violence don't deserve protections, senior citizens receiving Social Security on our disability, students using their stipend, which is advertised by our treasurer, asking them to get into the plan so that they can use their stipend, workers on tip wages, union workers on strike, and then, so those people don't deserve protections. I'm done with my questions, thank you.
And you did make a comment, that's what I'm saying, and I'll have to go back on the tapes and listen, but I'm sure I did not say any of that. What I said was we need to be able to check source of income and please don't put words in my mouth.
Okay. Revisor Mike had a little something to add to that real quick.
The veterans provision in the House bill says nothing would be construed to prevent a city or a county from adopting or maintaining an ordinance or resolution that prohibits a landlord from discriminating against a tenant based solely on the receipt of veterans benefits, unless the earlier part of the bill covers veterans benefits. A city or a county, I think under home rule could do this, but maybe it does need some kind of a clarification.
And I would encourage you to add that clause in there if need be. So,
Representative McNorton. Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very much appreciate your testimony and remember it from when we heard House Bill 2504. My question is, it seems to be that the Senate bill, or my memory from 2504, the problem that the landlords were having was primarily with this Chapter 8 program, this federal program that you can join voluntarily in the normal world, but in Lawrence, Kansas, they were making it where you had to go to all of the stipulations of it, regardless of whether you wanted to voluntarily or not. If I stated that correctly?
correct, that's correct.
Okay, so in some respects, the Senate Bill 391, I think cuts more to the chase because it does specifically call out, the Chapter 8 of Title 42 of the U.S. Code as far as that is the offending part of any legislation that you're wishing to have some protection from. Am I correct in that?
We just need to be able to determine if Section 8 works for us.
Exactly. All right. No, thank you. I just want to clarify that. Thank you.
Ed, not seeing any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Mark Toom. Mark, welcome back to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide proponent testimony on this Senate Bill 391. My name is Mark Toom with Kansas Realtors and represent more than 10,000 members involved in residential, agriculture, and commercial real estate. Many of my members are landlords, and that's the reason realtors are involved in this issue, and that's why we introduced the similar legislation. Those were actually introduced independently and separately in two different committees. The Senate version here was introduced by Chairman Senator Thompson, and there are differences than House Bill 2504 that passed the House 84 to 40 on February 18th. I think this version has a little bit more clarity about retroactivity, and then I think 2504 has that veterans piece. So I think that there can be certainly some smushing together, some policy choices that can be made to make, I think, the best of both bills. This is also similar to legislation that passed in Missouri last year. And there's other things in here, but as far as the home rule argument, and I spent 20 years working in local government associations, have a great respect for home rule and the ability of cities to be unique. I live in Lawrence, but certainly part of constitutional home rule is the ability of the legislature to say not so fast and to push back when things go out of bounds. And I think involving cities involving themselves in landlord-tenant relationships is a step too far, and I think that's why this is necessary, and I think it's really a thoughtful response to growing government overreach. It is only Lawrence now. City of Wichita was considering many of these provisions also recently, and so I think we're just trying to get ahead of this. So with that, you've heard this issue before, so I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Committee, any questions? Representative Bergkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mark, for being here. I guess in your opinion, do you think it's the right of a landlord to say, I wouldn't want to accept a tenant unless they pay me in cash or a check, as opposed to, I know there's a bill in the Senate about gold and silver being currency, or a landlord could say, I only want to be paid in Bitcoin, for example. Do you think that's the inherent right of a property owner to decide how they want to accept payment?
I mean, I think that would be negotiated in a landlord-tenant relationship that the tenant would sign if that's what they're going into with those terms of how they make a payment. I think you want to make payment in terms that is verifiable so that you can make sure that you're whole. And so as far as the type of payment, I'm not sure that this would be that.
Well, it's more just if you're a landlord, your tenant couldn't say, I want to pay you in Bitcoin, and since it's a source of income, the landlord would have to accept it because it's a source of income. You know what I mean? Like it.
Yeah, I don't think that the bill doesn't address that component, but I think that would be addressed with really the landlord-tenant relationship.
All right, thank you.
Agreement.
Representative Mosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's great to see you, Mark. So the ordinance in Lawrence has been in place for 3 years. How many landlords has fled because of this oppressive ordinance in our city that we both share and love? I hope we both love Lawrence.
Well, I do love Lawrence. I'm born and raised in Manhattan, so but I do live in Lawrence. There are more things similar between both cities than either people from either city are willing to admit. But I'm not sure. At this point, can you please repeat the question?
The question is how many landlords, because you're representing landlords and you live in Lawrence, I'm pretty sure you're chummy with them, you're chatting with them. So how many landlords are your friends that said, you know what, I think I'm gonna pack up and leave Lawrence because of this ordinance? That's my question.
I think there are some landlords, even in 3 years, I think there are landlords that are just still discovering this as somebody presents them with a voucher to make what is normally a voluntary program, and it's only mandatory in Lawrence. I'm not aware of anyone that is specifically left. I just think that I've heard concerns from a growing number of landlords that the record keeping of this is onerous, and that there are a lot of hoops that they have to go through. It is voluntary. There are a lot of people who choose to be participants of that, and that is a significant part of their landlord business, is to take this on. And so that's why it should really be, it really should just be voluntary.
And one more question, if I may. So source of income has been passed in over 120 cities, 20 states, including the liberal bastion of Oklahoma, and they have been able to manage with it. So what is it about Lawrence landlords that makes it where they can, their business model cannot be successful unless they can discriminate against veterans receiving VA disability compensation, victims of domestic violence receiving housing assistance, seniors on Social Security or disability, students using college stipends, workers on tip wages, union workers on strikes? What about Lawrence landlords that their business model is unsuccessful unless they can discriminate against those groups?
Well, I don't think they're discriminating against those groups. I think I'm supportive of Section 8 housing and all the components that qualify for that. So if I had that list of what you just said, I would list that we support Section 8 housing for all of those components. What we don't support is forcing landlords to be under the rules of Section 8. And I think that if you would go back and look at all of those cities and counties and jurisdictions that have accepted or the source of income restrictions, they're also motivating people to participate in the program. What Lawrence is doing is really, it's a carrot and a stick argument. They're forcing people to do it and not encouraging people to be part of the program. And I think they would get better participation if they motivated instead of penalized landlords.
May I ask one more question? I'm done after that, please, and thank you. So there's nothing in the ordinance that's forcing people to go under Section 8 housing under the ordinance. I've spoken to multiple people on the commission. I've spoken to our city, and so I feel like you're just, I don't know if you're doing, I don't want to impugn your motives, but you're mischaracterizing what that ordinance does, because the ordinance, someone who is receiving disability compensation, let's say that their sole income is they're 100% disabled, so let's say they're receiving $3,600 a month, and that's their only income. A landlord can't look at that and say, oh, I can't rent to you because your only income is coming from the federal government. But the landlord can say, hey, I understand your only income's coming from the federal government, but you have a history of punching holes in the wall. Now you can say you can't rent from that person. So I think that you're purposely mischaracterizing, because not all the people who are listed are receiving Section 8 vouchers. So someone who is getting a college stipend per se is not receiving a voucher. What they're doing is they're getting a stipend. So there's nothing about someone who's going to come and have an onerous checklist and say, hey, you need to go and have a working oven, because I've seen that in some of the apartments. We do have some slumlords in Lawrence. I'm pretty sure you can agree with that. So there's nothing about the ordinance in Lawrence that says that you have to be on Section 8. It just says that you cannot discriminate against someone because their income is not coming from the University of Kansas, or their income is not coming from Hallmark. So why do you continue to mischaracterize what the ordinance is doing in Lawrence?
I think we have a difference of opinion of how the ordinance is structured. It provides certainly as a protected class source of income, but what it does, and it covers a number of elements, but what it has the net effect of doing is making the Section 8 program mandatory because of the income that is presented to the landlord in that situation. So it makes a voluntary program mandatory. That's the effect of that ordinance. We can talk about the language and what it's really doing, but that's the net effect.
All right, thank you very much. And can I ask one question to research?
We're going to come back to you.
Okay.
Representative Wagner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here for the testimony. Again, just trying to get a little more clarity brought to this. The problem that the landlords in Lawrence have experienced is fundamentally, it's not about any source of income, to be honest, as far as, student aid or just other governmental benefits. It is totally, the problem has been this Chapter 8 of Title 42. I am correct in saying that. And so there is not a problem, and obviously, as business people, you'll take any sort of payment. It's just you don't want a payment that has huge strings attached that then create a paperwork burden and a regulatory burden that you did not voluntarily sign up for, which you could, I mean, it could be part of what you want to do, but a lot of landlords, it's not what they want to do. And that is the point of why you sought the legislation. Am I stating that correctly?
You're 100% correct, and that's what the rules and it is just onerous for some to participate in that program. And like I said, in every jurisdiction in this state, it is a voluntary program except in one.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mark, thanks for your testimony. And with respect of your organization, I'm understanding your argument here. I want to circle back to my colleague from Garden City about if Lawrence wants to do crazy things. If Garden City wants to do crazy things, I mean, isn't that the purpose of home rule, is to allow them to do what is best for the constituents of that city or the county?
Yeah, I firmly believe in local government, and that that's really where the rubber meets the road in providing services, and they should be innovative. But it is also part of home rule that the legislature can push back and say that enough is enough. And I think when you're inserting yourself in things like this, these are examples, and there are clear examples of the legislature preempting cities in areas, and I think that this is one that is justified.
And Mr. Chair, one more follow-up, I promise, if I may. Mark, so I believe I know your position, but I want to clarify. Let's say the city does a crazy thing and says, you know what, landlords, you cannot accept Section 8. They do the opposite of this, in which any financial assistance program, landlords, you can't accept it. They have to pay cash. They have to not be on assistance. What would be your position on that if the bill did the opposite?
I don't think that would be illegal from the federal point of view. I mean, I would oppose that. I think that there's a role for housing assistance at the federal level, so I don't think it would be illegal. I mean, it's a thought exercise, but yeah, I would oppose that because I think there's a need for that money for housing.
Representative Mosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my question is for research. Can you all look into the Lawrence ordinance and see if there's anything in there that makes Section 8 mandatory so that we can have clarification on that? Thank you.
Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jordan Milholland, Legislative Research. If it's okay, we'll work with the revisers and get the language to them, and maybe they could provide some information on that.
Thank you. You could pass that to the whole committee. Thank you.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Lawrence has kind of forgot that maybe landowners are constituents also. And it seems like every time that government tries to get in bed with business, business always seems to lose. If everybody would just kind of stay in their own lane, things seem to work out pretty good. But the landlords, they pay all the taxes, all the upkeep. I mean, they're probably at a stress point that probably some of us don't even understand, but I see where you're coming from on your bill.
Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mark, for being here today. Isn't it also, I mean, there's some conversation here today a little bit about local control and home rule and those things, but doesn't private property rights and freedom of association trump home rule when it comes to things like this?
I would probably agree with that assessment. I think that and that's probably the purpose of this bill, is to kind of unravel some of that.
Not seeing any more? Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
That's all I had down for, sorry about that. Yeah, that's all I had for oral proponents. We do have in your S drive there, you should be able to find those. We have 42 written proponents, and they're all listed out here. Was there anybody else wanting to speak as a proponent? Not seeing any. We're going to close this section. We're going to go to neutral. I have one written neutral. Was there anyone wanting to speak out in a neutral capacity? Not seeing any. We're going to close the neutral side of this. And we're going to open up the opponents. And first up is going to be Dustin Hare. Dustin, welcome to committee. Just a little trivial fact, you're actually the only one speaking today that didn't speak last time. Welcome to committee.
Privileged class today. All right. Thank you, Chair Kessler, members of the community. My name is Dustin Hare. I'm the Economic Security Policy Advisor at Kansas Action for Children, and I appreciate the opportunity to provide testimony in opposition to SB 391. This morning, I want to touch on two items. I want to talk a little bit about housing insecurity affects children. I think that's often lost in the conversation. And then I want to offer a different direction that we can take this bill. So for starters, when we talk about people who are housing insecure, people who have Section 8 vouchers, veteran vouchers, et cetera, I think we sometimes forget that many of those people may have kids. But in fact, they often do. 17% of single mothers have a Section 8 housing voucher. Nationwide, approximately 1.2 million kids experience some form of homelessness in an average year. Kids who go through periods of housing insecurity can be deeply affected by it. They experience a wide range of both physical and mental health issues. They tend to have lower test scores. They're more likely to have behavioral problems. Given these facts, kids should definitely be a part of this conversation, part of the conversation when we talk about housing. If we want to see them grow up happy and healthy, then we need to make sure that they can grow up in a stable environment. The past few years, we've heard a lot about housing affordability. We've heard about it in this legislature, in the news, in our neighborhoods. We're hearing about it everywhere we go because it's a very real problem that all of us are facing together. And nobody really has a silver bullet for how to address it. I think we should be looking to our cities to help us figure out what some of those solutions could look like, given that nobody has found the solution yet. Right now, Lawrence is the only city in our state that requires landlords to take Section 8 vouchers. They did this because they heard valid concerns from renters who live in their city. They heard from families who are struggling to find affordable housing, and they acted on it. Now we're also hearing concerns from landlords, and those concerns are valid too. But the concerns from renters are still very real and should not be discounted. My suggestion is that we let this play out a while longer. Instead of prohibiting cities from experimenting with policies to help keep families housed, let's lean on those cities to teach us what works and what doesn't. Instead of prohibiting the types of ordinances outlined in this bill, let's instead require that when cities pass such an ordinance, they submit a report to the legislature showing the results of these programs, showing whether they work or not. I think we'll find that these ordinances help low-income renters stay housed, and that they do so without causing harm to landlords. And if we find out otherwise, then let's come back and reconsider this legislation at that time. But let's get more data to see if programs like the one in Lawrence help keep more kids in a stable environment. That's what I've got today. Thank you for your time, and I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
We'll come back and ask questions here at the end because we have several people talking today. Dustin, thank you. Next up, we have Christy Baumann. Christy, welcome back to committee.
Thank you. My name is Christy Boffman. I'm Executive Director for United Community Services of Johnson County. And I provided testimony for this committee previously, so I'm not going to kind of go over that. I'm going to go off script, so look out. As I was listening to our proponents, I myself am a small landlord, and so I have a deep investment in my community, a deep investment from a financial perspective. I think that landlords are doing okay across the state of Kansas. I feel like we've heard a lot of, feelings of landlords being imperiled. The reality is, across the state of Kansas, rental properties are at almost 100% occupancy. They're full almost all the time. Over the last 5 years, we have seen the number of rental properties that go for $1,000 or less across this state diminish by 35%. Meanwhile, almost 270% increase in properties that rent for $2,000 a month or more. Landlords are doing great in Kansas. Not concerned about landlords at all. What I am concerned about, though, are renters. And I'm concerned about renters because almost half of all renters across the state are housing cost burdened. When we are spending 30% or more of our income on our housing, we are not saving for emergencies. We're not saving for a down payment. We're less likely to invest in education or training that would improve our job prospects. So when we think about who we need to protect across the state of Kansas, I'm less concerned about landlords and a little bit more concerned about stable housing for renters especially. The last thing that I want to leave you with is the scope of this problem. We keep coming back to housing choice vouchers. There are 400,000 rental properties across the state of Kansas. 3% of those rental properties receive vouchers. You want to make a statewide preemption law for 3% of renters across the state of Kansas. And I agree with our representative from Garden City. The things that are happening in Overland Park or in Colby or in Pittsburgh are all very different. I know that in my community, I pay a lot of attention to what's going on, and I know that my residents in my community are more likely to know what's happening with housing, what the needs are related to housing, and I know that our representatives and our elected officials are best poised to respond to those needs. So I feel like this bill actually takes away flexibility in addressing our housing needs across the state of Kansas rather than actually solving anything. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Christy. Next up, we have Spencer Duncan. Mayor, welcome back to committee.
Government Affairs Director, League of Kansas Municipalities, that's the hat. I guess technically I'm a landlord too. I guess not technically, if you have a property and you rent it out to someone, I guess you're a landlord. Deja vu all over again, here we are. Look, we didn't like this bill the first time, we don't love it the second time. I will also tell you this is my 21st session up here, so I understand the reality of standing before you in a bill that's passed one chamber and you have a mirror bill that's passed your chamber, and here we are. I came up here today to make one point. I'm going to make three, though, as I've listened to the conversation. I wasn't actually going to talk too much about local control and home rule, believe it or not, but I'll make one quick point of that, one to reiterate and one to follow up to some comments that were made. We already have laws on the books that involve the government and landlords. So the idea that landlords and the government shouldn't get involved with each other, our laws are filled with laws that already dictate certain things that landlords can and can't do in the state of Kansas. So this is not some new threshold or barrier. We just will always remind you that it's constitutional home rule, not statutory home rule, which means the threshold you are supposed to use before you preempt is this a statewide problem that needs immediately to be addressed by this legislature? And we would contend that one city has done this. Out of all of our 1,000 townships and 625 plus cities and 105 counties, I don't believe one meets that threshold. The second point I'll make and listen to the conversation is just a reminder, which will lead into my last point, is the Lawrence law does not mandate that you take Section 8 housing. What it says is you cannot use income source as the sole reason to preclude someone from becoming a renter in your house. You can still use criminal backgrounds, past history with other landlords, all of those other credit scores, all of those other things still apply. It just says you can't instantly look at where their money comes from and make a distinction that says, well, it's a government voucher versus mom or dad is paying the bills. You just have to at least factor in money is money, right? And so the reason I think that's an important distinction is for the last point I want to make. I don't like this bill. So I always hate helping people make it a little better, or at least doing something. If the real concern here is specific to programs such as Section 8, or what I would call direct federal government assistance, then carve that out. Because I will tell you, we have local municipal programs that are essentially cash, if you will, credit, if you will, a certificate, whatever you want to call it, that individuals get from their local municipalities, that they get from other programs that don't have the same barriers, that are no different than any other income source. And to treat their income source differently simply because it comes from one of those assistance programs does create problems for that individual long term as they are trying to move forward in life and better their situation. So if you're looking for a way to thread that needle, I would offer that you could offer some amendment that says any program that's a direct federal administered by the federal government and Section 8, but not preclude all of these other local programs that exist that could be impacted by this, that don't have all of those same hoops and barriers and jumps that you have to go through. So I would offer that as something you could consider if you move this forward. So that is all I have today, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Spencer. Next up, I have Anita Alexander. Anita, welcome to committee.
Hello, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Anita Alexander. I am a Kansan. I am a renter. I'm also someone who grew up in a very low-income family who relied on housing programs like Section 8 and rental assistance. Renters, especially those who receive housing assistance, face significant barriers. Landlords, on the other hand, have broad discretion over who they rent to. They can use credit checks, they can use background checks, they do income verification, they do rental history requirements. But low-income Kansans do not have that flexibility. Their housing options are already very limited. Policies that prevent local governments from expanding safe and stable housing widen the gap between people who have abundant choices and people who have very few. This bill is unnecessary overreach. Some of what I was going to say in my testimony has been said by the other opponents of this bill, is something that I think the committee already recognizes, is that the towns and counties and communities across Kansas vary vastly from one another. A sweeping statewide prohibition strips those cities and counties of their ability to respond to any specific challenges facing their communities. What about reasonable protections that are just aimed at preventing discriminatory practices? All of that could be invalidated under this bill. It creates uncertainty for local governments attempting to address housing in good faith. Local housing issues should be addressed with local solutions. 391 removes that flexibility. It undermines local control. I think the most important point I have to make here is that the legislature should focus on the needs of the most vulnerable Kansans. Please vote no on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita. Last up that I have down here, bat and cleanup, to take us home on this, Pancho Metz. No pressure, Pancho. Well, welcome back to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You all were so friendly to me last time I testified, I couldn't help but make a return. This day gets better, being able to follow the legendary Anita in testifying. I guess it really is. The sequel is better than the original. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Pancho Metz. I'm a private citizen, a Lawrence renter, and I'm an opponent of Senate Bill 391. Quite frankly, I feel that this legislation is deeply unnecessary. There's already been discussion that this ordinance is not a mandate, so I'm not going to go through that. What I will say is that if this bill were to pass and repeal the language that we have in our source of income, many college students like myself who use a portion of their 529 plan to pay for housing, I would be really concerned that that investment and educational opportunity would also be the very thing that locks us out from rental housing. Moving on to another point is that within Lawrence, when this ordinance passed, we had a local group that challenged this in court, and it was upheld in the district court, the Supreme Court, and the Kansas Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. This very group also sponsors private candidate forums and requires membership dues from their members. I, as a tenant, it's very reasonable to assume that tenants pay those dues through our rent, and we are also not allowed to attend those forums. These landlords do have a lot of access to local and city commissions. They have been able to have these discussions, and even in court, and this ordinance has passed the city, they have sided with renters on this. Finally, I'm very concerned about the override of local control. A lot of legislative districts include carved out portions. In fact, in Lawrence, 12 state legislators represent different parts and pieces of Lawrence and Douglas County. And I worry that voiding 5 city commissioners, each of whom represent the entire city, as none of them have assigned districts, and 5 county commissioners, which is a board that was recently expanded from 3 to 5 to include more representation from the rural area, risks disenfranchising voices and limiting solutions to address local housing. Furthermore, this bill would revoke the ability of nearly 2.9 million Kansans, 630 municipalities, and 105 counties to pass similar legislation for the sole purpose of overriding the actions of one municipality. Finally, I feel that this bill is simply an attempt by a small but powerful group to legislate certain personal grievances to an ordinance after exhausting the legislative and judicial process and failing to prove that this is a hindrance to doing business. For those reasons, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I urge you to vote no on Senate Bill 391, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Pancho. Committee, we're going to open up this to questions. Committee, do we have any questions? Representative Birdcamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If Mr. Duncan would make an appearance. Thank you. Thank you, Spencer. I kind of see this maybe in parallel a little bit, and I know this is a payment. I'm going to ask maybe more of a payment than an income question.
Sure.
But so right now we're debating if it's compelled or not, if you have to accept Section 8. I guess my concern is we're kind of going down this path of governments telling businesses or owners that they have to do certain things. Would this be kind of similar if a city would say you have to take like a SNAP benefit or TANF? It's like a grocery store, because right now they don't have to, but I didn't know if there's any parallels to that or not in your mind.
I honestly haven't thought about that. Is this my comment? Okay. Honestly haven't thought about it from that perspective. What I will tell you is these programs, these housing programs are a little more reliable in terms of those monies they're direct, and that's the other thing that's gotten lost in this. Most of these programs aren't the individuals holding a card or having a voucher in hand or having to make, these are direct deposit payments that go right to the landlords. So I think the one distinction there is you're actually not even involving the tenant 9 times out of 10. They're just getting the approval. So if they get into the apartment, let's say, they've been approved, it's a direct transfer. That individual actually never sees that money, whereas in the other case, there's a little bit of the individual has some more control over that card. So that would be the only distinction, but I haven't thought about it, so I will do a little thought of that for you.
No, that's okay. I just appreciate it.
But that's the only difference in those parallels that I can think of.
Yeah, thank you.
Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for Mr. Duncan as well. So you make a good point about the constitutional home rule provision. And I believe you're correct in the sense that the way you frame that the city of Lawrence represents like 3.27% of the Kansas population. So I guess my question would be, what would constitute a problem that would arise to the level of meeting that threshold of the state intervening on something that's a home rule?
Well, now we need some constitutional lawyers in on this conversation, right? This is the great debate. But to your point, I think I will always concede that is the grayest area of these conversations, right? Because I am going to stand here 9 times out of 10 and mostly 100 and be a purist, and it's worked with me both ways. There are some bills I don't always like, but I say, well, if I'm a true constitutional home rule, we need to support that, whether I want to or not. So I can't tell you that the number is 25%, 40% of the cities if they did this, or if municipalities did this. I mean, you know, I can just tell you that 1 seems too low. I think if you suddenly saw a rash of cities doing it, I would still fight for their right to do it. That'd be a different conversation, though. But if this legislature said, okay, we've got 10% of the state, or 10% of the population, or 15% of the population, so from my perspective as a legislature, that's a new threshold, I think that's a fair conversation. So I know that's a really terrible answer because I don't think there's a definitive, but I think it's kind of, you start to know it when you see it a little bit, and then at least you're having that conversation as opposed to one city versus if 20 or 30 or 40 started doing it.
Thank you for that, Mr. Duncan. And my last question was, is there anybody here representing the city of Lawrence today? I know they couldn't be here for the House bill, but
I believe they submitted written testimony only, and that there's nobody here from Lawrence outside of any representatives they may have who are in the room. That is my understanding.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Representative Corbett.
Thank you, Chairman. As most of us in this room, we've got our mail this month about the enjoyment of property tax increases. And these landlords, they've got that to fight, and the cost of remodeling and keeping things in the right rentable condition. It seems the reason these people are here today is they had no voice in Lawrence, and they had to come somewhere to try to get justice. So I think that's why they're here.
I'll just say 2 things: that they have a voice because they all voted and they elected people. Just as I will stand here as Mayor of Topeka and say, you don't have to agree with me, but the people elected me. And so I am their voice, and I do the best I can, just like any other elected official. The second thing I'll tell you regarding the valuations is I agree with you. And I really hope that this legislature does something to adjust the valuation system of which you control, not the cities and counties, before this session is over. So, me too, I know.
Representative Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could have Poncho first. Yes, hi. I'm actually, in all honesty, also a former Lawrence rental student. Paid for it with my student scholarships and money I'd earned. I guess you made a mention of a Section 529 student. What exactly is that again?
The 529 Learning, or I guess Quest Learn, they kind of changed the name of it, but it's the educational savings plan that pays for college, and you can use a part of it to pay for your housing as well.
Okay, does Section 529 have anything to do with Chapter 8, Title 42 voucher program?
It is not a housing voucher. The reason that I brought it up is I was concerned that if this bill were to pass and it would repeal all of our language, because within the Senate bill, it calls out Section 8 vouchers, but it also, during the final lines 5 and line 6, or that otherwise restricts the landlord ability to consider the income source of a prospective tenant. So it's kind of anything else in general in that as well.
Okay, and you made mention of a court case that was, I guess, relating to the Lawrence statute. Of course, typically a court case is going to be totally different issues than what is before a legislature. But I am curious, do you know what's the name of the case? Do you have a reference for that as far as just...
If you look up, the Lawrence Times covered it, but I believe the group that filed the lawsuit was the Landlords of Lawrence, and I believe it was Landlords of Lawrence v. Lawrence, and there were elements that talked about constitutions and the mandate as well to it.
Okay, no, thank you. And if you don't mind, if I talk to
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Duncan. Yeah, Mr. Duncan. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was kind of jumping around.
I didn't hear you, my fault.
So I did want to, obviously you're definitely against either of the bills, but the language of the Senate Bill 391 is a bit more specific at talking about housing choice voucher programs authorized by Chapter 8 of Title 42. I mean, so it doesn't directly affect these other sources of income, which I think have been brought up, but I mean, that is more the type of language that you would, if we're going to be upset about this, it helps if we're just upset about the one part and not about the rest.
Right. It'd be nice if there was at least a clarifier that indicated local government programs or excluding direct government programs, something that makes it a little more clear so that just to make that dividing line, we always like a little more clarification if it's possible. So, yeah, something that doesn't eliminate the local government program.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Representative Mosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, once again, there's nothing in the Lawrence ordinance that mandates Section 8, but I would like to speak to the landlord/housing advocacy person from Johnson County, and I'm sorry that I don't remember your name.
Hi, Christy Boffman.
Sorry, thank you, Miss Christie. So you're a landlord, and you're able to, and do you accept Section 8 vouchers or anything along those lines?
My husband and I, we're very small landlords. We have one duplex, and in the time that we've had the property, we just have not gone down
Okay,
that road.
and if someone came to you and they were a disabled veteran receiving compensation, a victim of domestic violence, a senior on Social Security, student using college stipends, workers on tip wages, and union workers, and they had their credit checked, and you did all the other backgrounds, would your business model be unsuccessful unless you could discriminate against those individuals?
Now, my primary concern, honestly, is for my tenants to be able to pay their rent, full
Okay,
stop.
perfect. And then if I may have one more question, if you may. You deal with like families who also are, so when I was in the third grade, we moved from Kansas City to New York. And because my dad worked for the government. And in Kansas City, in the school district, they taught cursive in the third grade. And in New York, they taught it in the second grade. And I moved halfway through the third grade. And so I had a gap in at least that education where I don't know how to properly write in cursive. I had to kind of be self-taught taught by my parents. And it's not a big deal. It's a big deal now. But when someone is constantly moving, let's say, for instance, there's a family like single mothers on vouchers and they're constantly having to find housing that will decreasingly accept them because we have less cheap housing or less affordable or attainable housing, what happens to that student who is constantly changing school districts?
I mean, I have my own anecdotal data, but I think that Dustin would probably be the best person to answer that question.
Okay, so can Dustin come up and answer that question? What happens to, because we do talk about how much we care about our young people who are our greatest resource for Kansas in the future of our state. Thank you.
Sure, thanks for that question. Dustin from Kansas Action for Children. I've written about this more in depth and I can send that to you, but in my testimony I talked about how when kids move around, they experience a wide range of both physical and mental health issues. They have lower math and English scores on their tests. They experience emotional behavioral issues that can disrupt class, so on and so forth. So it does affect them in the near term as well as in the long term as well.
And one more question, if I may. And you may be familiar with this and you may not be familiar with this, but a lot of prisons, like projections for prisons is based off of fourth grade reading scores. I don't know if you're familiar with that, how we are projecting our prison population based off fourth grade reading scores. Are you familiar with that?
I am not.
Okay, then I won't ask you the question. Okay, never mind. Thank you.
Okay.
Not seeing any more. Thank you. Oh, I apologize. Representative Howell?
Thank you, Chair. I just had one quick question for Spencer Duncan, if I may.
Yes.
I'll be brief.
No, you're good.
Just along the questions of the constitutional home rule and what might be an appropriate example, perhaps, that we might agree on. A number of years ago, I think about 13 or so years ago, it used to be in the state of Kansas that the cities across the state had different rules for about how citizens in Kansas were allowed to carry or, well, I'll stick with the word carry, firearms on their bodies or in their vehicles across the state. And so every city was different. And even every county, as I recall. And so citizens in Kansas didn't know, it made it very difficult for citizens to be law-abiding and to know how they could practice their Second Amendment rights. And so the legislature took the action of making it a statewide law and that was consistent across the state, and we overruled the constitutional home rule of the cities. And well, we don't call it, it's not called that for counties, but and I think, in my opinion, that is an appropriate time to apply this. Is that something that you'd be more along to say that would be a good example?
I do believe that in Kansas, when it comes to uniformity on a couple of issues, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, right? The big fun ones, right? Gambling, right? And there's one or two others. We have sort of set a very clear precedent and an agreement among locals in the state that those issues should be uniform and probably do elevate themselves to that level. So yes, I think there is this group of categories that firearms fall into that, and it is one of those big 6 or 7 that I think qualifies. And we have not traditionally pushed back on those issues. Yep, for that reason.
Now not seeing any more. Thank you, Spencer. That was all I had for people speaking today. I would like to point out there is, we have 15 written opponents in your S drive as well. If you haven't had a chance to look those over, please do. And with that, I'm going to close the hearing on SB 391. And committee, I want to bring your attention to the minutes that we sent out earlier for everybody to look over. That was February 13th, the 25th, and the 26th. And do I have a motion to approve those? Representative Smoy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I move that we accept the minutes from the 13th, 25th, and 26th as presented.
And we have a second really quick. Representative Reese. Committee, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion passes. Now, everybody, keep a lookout on your email. We will revise our schedule for next week. We were waiting on some bills to kind of come over to us, and they haven't been read in yet. So as soon as we get a hold of those, we'll get everything posted up. So I'm not sure what Monday looks like right now, but just kind of keep it open. And we'll get that new schedule out as soon as we can. Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was curious with daylight savings time coming up, if there was any attempt to work the Senate daylight savings times bill by Senator Titus.
Yeah. Great timing, right? Yeah, we'll have to see. Any committee?
Are we meeting tomorrow?
No meeting tomorrow. Okay, well, with that, I think we're done here. We're adjourned.